welcome. You're tuned into Eye on Africa here on Live from Paris. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi. These are the top stories. Malians head to the polls on Sunday to decide whether to give incumbent Ibrahim Boubacar Keita a second term as president or hand it over to one of his rivals. Meanwhile, in Bamako, the curtain closes on campaigning. Zimbabwe prepares for landmark general and presidential elections on Monday in the southern nation's first post-Mugabe vote. A record 23 candidates are vying for Zimbabwe's top job. With hopes high, we examine what voters really want. Also coming up, as Africa becomes more modern, the elderly are at times being left behind. We look at how old people cope without families to care for them. Our correspondent reports from Togo. We take you first to Mali, where they'll be voting on Sunday to decide whether to give the incumbent Ibrahim Boubacar Keita a second term in the country's top job or hand it over to one of his rivals. Well, the curtain closed on campaigning this Friday with the last rallies held in the capital, Bamako. The UN has meanwhile warned that whoever wins Sunday's polls will urgently need to address violence in central Mali. Polls come amid the country's worst insecurity since 2012. Earlier, I spoke to Frank Hersey in the capital, Bamako.
We got off to a quiet start at the beginning of the month, but it is coming to something of a crescendo here tonight. There's actually 24 candidates standing for president, but you'd be forgiven for thinking tonight that there's just two, the main two rivals. Behind me here is the rally for the incumbent president, Keita. We're here on the banks of the River Niger, but just a few hundred meters away, there's a corresponding rally for supporters of Soumaïla Cissé, the main rival candidate. So I think, as you can probably see, there's quite a lot going on here tonight. There's a very positive atmosphere and plenty of engagement. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that this is just Bamako, the capital.
Well, I mean, you raise a good point there, Frank. It seems very lively indeed. Things seem to be OK in Bamako. The elephant, though, in the room is insecurity, growing insecurity in Mali. Is this being addressed in the election campaigning?
I would say that it's not so much addressed in the campaigning head-on in terms of voting in the polls, but there's actually, despite the atmosphere here tonight, there's actually expected to be very low turnout on Sunday. Part of that is going to be because of security, because in the centre and vast north of Mali, there are conflicts between rival ethnic and religious groups, as well as jihadist attacks. And that's expected to put people off even turning up at polling stations. And another reason for this expected low turnout is a sort of disenchantment with the political system at the moment. President Keita has not been keeping up with the country's peace process, which began in 2015. And people have lost faith in the state system. And so while there are actually 8 million people registered to vote this Sunday and some 30,000 security personnel promised by the government to help keep peace on the streets, it remains to be seen how many are actually going to go to the polling stations and place those votes in the ballot boxes.
To Zimbabwe next, where a close race is on for the presidency as the country prepares to head to the polls on Monday. Now, the election marks the first since strongman Robert Mugabe, who'd dominated Zimbabwe since 1980, was ousted from power. Monday's polls pit the incumbent Emmerson Mnangagwa of the ruling ZANU-PF party against the Movement for Democratic Change's candidate Nelson Chamisa. He is a 40-year-old lawyer. More details with Maud Julien.
An election without Robert Mugabe. Most of these young people had no idea what that looked like up to now. The former leader was ousted by the army last year after nearly 4 decades in power. And now, in Zimbabwe's capital, Harare, there's renewed hope.
People are excited!
The two main candidates are current President Mnangagwa and lawyer Nelson Chamisa. Both have tried to win over younger voters, nearly half the electorate, with promises of economic growth. It's estimated over 90% of the population is unemployed.
There's nothing coming
for the youth, isn't it? We can look in terms of employment, we can look in terms of even the education. What we are aiming as youth is nothing.
There's been no improvement since the new leader took office, but for the first time in 17 years, international observers were allowed in for the election, and a record 23 candidates are running.
I'm hoping for the elections to be free, fair and credible. That's number one. Number two, I'm expecting the elections to usher in a new Zimbabwe.
Heavy expectations weigh on the future winner. He'll be tasked with reforming the country's governance and economy amid concerns that the military, who oversaw the transition, may not be ready to lose political influence just yet.
Well, as part of his campaign promises, President Mnangagwa has vowed to rescue the country's dwindling economy, revive farms and mines and do away with corruption. His rival, Nelson Chamisa's promise to infrastructural change, plus attracting foreign investors and to tap into youth potential. Well, Nelson Chamisa has been speaking to France 24 about the importance of the youth vote.
Zimbabwe has never known genuine peace or genuine freedom or genuine happiness. For the past period of 38 years, it has been neglected advantages, missed opportunities, disappointments on account of what government has done by omission or by commission. So those deficits have to be cured. And the only person who is able to cure is a young man, young people taking charge, young people defining their future, and young people, coming to step up to the plate to say, we are defining the way forward for ourselves, for our people, for posterity, and for future generations. To be able to do that, we need to have proper reforms. Reform, reform, reform.
Next, Uganda's opposition has warned that leader Yoweri Museveni is on track for, quote, a life presidency after a court cleared the way for him to run for a sixth term. Well, the court upheld a constitutional amendment scrapping presidential age limits previously set at 75. The law would have blocked 73-year-old Museveni from running for president in 2021, but a bill removing that limit was signed into law last December.
When we lost the 7 years extension, it was largely a balanced judgment, and it really painted a good picture for our rule of law.
Unfortunately, I'm not satisfied. I think our judges lack the courage to tell the president that he has been around long enough.
Now, across Africa, elderly people are, for the most part, looked after by family members as they age. This next report, though, explores how, as Africa becomes more modern, old people are sometimes being left behind. The lack of care homes means that elderly people without family are often forced to fend for themselves. Our correspondent in Togo sent us this report.
As she reaches the last stage of her life, Ernestine's dog is her sole companion to fight her loneliness. Too sick to get up, she lies on her bed most of the time. Her only link with the outside world is this teenager who prefers not to be filmed.
I come twice a week because she's heavy to carry.
The 86-year-old never had any children of her own, and her brothers and sisters have all passed away. She was abandoned by her nephews and now lives in utter destitution.
In the old days, these people were highly valued. The older they got, the more they were respected. Today, with social change and modernisation, this no longer stands.
Conditions are hardly any better for elderly people who are hospitalised, social services being almost non-existent. Paki Kalsongi works for an organisation that tries to fill the void. Today he's bringing water to an old man suffering from severe dehydration. Hospitals provide neither meals nor drugs.
We need to buy oranges and other fruit to give him some strength.
The organisation, which relies on donations, does the best it can to help elderly people in need.
We help them live better.
But a few hours after our visit, the patient suffering from dehydration passed away, his death going practically unnoticed. According to a report from the Ministry of Social Affairs, only 13% of elderly people benefit from retirement plans. Options to care for old people in precarious situations are still being considered.
And finally, stargazers across Africa have been turning to the night sky to watch a complete lunar eclipse, the longest of this century. Well, the blood moon eclipse began in Kenya, coinciding with Mars's closest approach in 15 years. Lasting 2 hours, it's visible at different times across Africa, Australia, Asia, Europe and South America. This, of course, when the sun, Earth and moon line up perfectly, casting the Earth's shadow on the moon. You're up to date. Coming up, more international headlines here on France 24. Do stay tuned.